guys. I hope you're relaxed right now and just ready to hear about some of my thoughts when it comes to game design and how certain games don't really have longevity in mind, or at least they do, but not very far in the future, you could say. So let's just jump right into it. So my first example would be card games. So as many of you may or may not know, certain card games such as Yu-Gi-Oh! Have been around for more than 20 years and essentially can still use the same cards that came out back then, which, although sounds really cool, you basically run into problems where how does the game become more complex, right? Because if you have a certain level of ideas and base cards when the game is initially balanced, and then you add more cards in the future, how many cards can you add until the game is fundamentally broken or just not the same anymore? And my argument is one more card automatically changes everything about the game, because basically you start going down this rabbit hole where the odds of you coming across a certain deck or a certain type of player is now totally different. If you have 100 cards in a pool, well, the likelihood of your opponent using certain cards is automatically changed by just one more card being added, to where now this card is an option, and now there just adds more randomness to not only your opponent's possible decks, so now you have to prepare for more outcomes, but also every card after that initial one is only going to make the initial mechanics either worse or I've heard about this before. Essentially, every set that comes out, they need to make a new gimmick so that essentially it's actually worth people buying the cards, because if you try to use a deck from 20 years ago versus someone who is building with the most common high level cards right now, I don't think you would stand a chance. And I don't play Yu-Gi-Oh, so I can't really tell you for sure, but that's what I've heard anyway, is that essentially they release better and better cards, and although you can still play the old cards, and some of them are still viable, but for the most part, yeah, they replace all the old strategy with new gimmicks that totally are just more consistent and better in every way. And so Yu-Gi-Oh! Is an example of a game that is self-defeating, which means, like I said, that just by virtue of continuing or adding to the game, it doesn't necessarily become worse. That's a matter of opinion, but it's never the same ever again. And of course, you could play with the rules of you can only use cards up to a certain era, but that's kind of not the point. That's you imposing a rule. I'm talking about the actual game itself. The new cards that come out, regardless of whatever rule set you're playing in, are still Yu-Gi-Oh! So that's how I count that anyway. So an example of this that is kind of better subjectively is the Pokemon card game, which essentially every couple of years rotates the modern format to where all old cards before that format are no longer playable. They do bring back certain cards every time just because they are fundamentally the core of the game, but the problem with this obviously is that let's be real, it's not that expensive if it's your only real hobby, but to build a deck and keep up with the metas and things like that every time new sets come out, it will cost you a good amount to keep up with that sort of thing, versus imagine a game where you make your deck and you never have to change it. You're forced to change it in Pokemon, but at the same time that can keep it fresh to people. So yeah, and they still have an unlimited format, which means you can play any old cards, but I'm not really sure how common that is. And even then, the unlimited format isn't as romantic as you would like to think. It's usually just using really OP strategies from random metas throughout. It's not just, let's use all the old cards because they're fun, which that is mostly the reason, but usually it's because there's some broken strategies hidden within the past 20 years of Pokemon, so that's what everyone actually uses. And so now still Pokemon is the Pokemon video games, which I guess sort of the problem is most of these are relatable, but this one's a bit different, which is the fact that there are so many different Pokemon now that certain Pokemon become either so niche that they're unplayable or just obsolete entirely. So there are Pokemon, I don't know really for example, but I mean, well actually, if you just go into Smogon and look anything below like RU, everything below that is virtually unplayable as far as competitively, but just in the sake of the actual fun of the game, like there's almost too many options, there's too much going on, and so a lot of times the best strategies will devolve to either the most spammy or like hacks related strategies or stall. I remember back in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, the most common like strategy was Sableye and Chansey, because they would just synchronize so well and they're just really stally. And so the game also had a timer, I think, of 1 minute between turns, and there was an overall hour time limit. And if you ever watch like Wi-Fi battles on YouTube, people would hit that 1 hour mark all the time, and a lot of times on purpose. And of course, it was seen as like, you know, a dick move to time someone out, but at the same time, there was no rule against it. I mean, if you had to do that, like that's something you could do as a strategy legitimately. And so yeah, I mean, when there's so many Pokemon, like it's really cool, I guess, if you like, I don't know, maybe it's just nostalgia to why I like old Pokemon so much more, but everything since really Gen I would say 6 and on don't even feel like Pokemon because they don't ever have a 2D sprite, I guess, besides in your party. But yeah, these Pokemon just kind of go over my head, and I guess that's because, like I was saying, my first Pokemon game was Pokemon Leaf Green, and I got that for my first Game Boy game, and I guess I was like 4 or 5 at the time. I'm 19 now, so yeah, I think what was I thinking? Oh yeah, so maybe it's just nostalgia, but I think a lot of people feel the same sentiment. Like, there are just so many Pokemon now that when a new one comes out, even if it's really weird and fills a niche, like, you know, a poison electric type like Toxtricity or something like that, it still doesn't really feel the same. And I think, in my personal opinion, the best Pokemon games to come out in the past like 10 years, which is crazy to think about that it's been like 10 years since Black and White, but it's probably Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, because those still had like, I don't know, I think it's because I love Ruby and Sapphire so much as games, and so the remakes, like, they did a lot right. You could catch all of those mythical Pokemon. You had the Chansey bases. There was like a lot to it, and catching all the Pokemon was like, I don't know, it felt somewhat reasonable back then. I did it in both X and Alpha Sapphire. I completed the Pokedex, which is like a lot. I mean, I don't remember exactly how many it was back then. I think it was like either 6, 12, or something like that many Pokemon. And so completing it actually felt like an accomplishment. All the Pokemon still felt, I guess, sort of unique. But then, yeah, I don't know, I guess Sun and Moon and then Sword and Shield came out, and I don't know, I think that time between X and Y, or I mean Omega Ruby, Alpha Sapphire, and Sun and Moon, I forget what happened. Maybe it was Pokemon Go, or like another game came out, but then there was Let's Go. There's just so much they're doing that I know it's like common knowledge in the Pokemon community that that's just, you know, a cash grab, obviously, how much attention they put on Gen 1. But like I said, the amount of Pokemon is just too many, and so they knew that going into Sword and Shield, and don't let anyone tell you the reason they're not putting all the Pokemon in is because of graphics or storage or something like that. Like, they could very easily have fit them all in the game. I mean, the game isn't even that big anyway, as far as, you know, the open world and things like that. And so they could have easily cut other useless content to put all the Pokemon in the game. But obviously they're just selling it as DLC, which is kind of embarrassing. But I wish they stuck to this idea. Like, I like the concept of getting rid of Pokemon, not necessarily permanently, but for instance, like competitively, because there's already, I mean, 500, 600 plus that are totally unplayable. Maybe not 600, but the vast majority of Pokemon never get used in high-level competitive play anyway. So why keep bringing them back? Like, just because people like them, I understand that, but like I was saying, if they took the full-on approach of it being a more competitive game, they got rid of all like the, kind of just dumb storyline type stuff and just focused on a more or less like just battling experience, because the story of Pokemon and things like that is mostly uninteresting. I mean, they're not terrible, but like, I mean, it's the same game like every year, really. I mean, the problem with Pokemon and like just the gameplay itself is you're never taught to play strategically. You can just sit there with, one Pokemon, you overlevel, spam one move throughout the entire game, and that's it. Like, there's no strategy involved. There's no, reading. The enemies don't switch unless you literally change the setting to do that. They also give you, tips now for what's super effective. Like, you don't even have to know or memorize Pokemon anymore. You just click the button that it tells you to click, essentially. And just overall, it's super watered down. And another thing too that I dislike is how the shiny chance has been like increased consistently since Generation 5 or 6, I think it was. Whenever they introduced the shiny charm, or even I guess Generation 4 with the Pokéradar, like, I remember those were like some of the coolest videos on YouTube, were like Pokéradar shinies. But even then, it's like anything in the world. I mean, once it becomes more readily available, it's less sought after. So when you have shinies that, I mean, in reality, you could say to somebody, get me a shiny in the next 6 hours, and they could easily do it in any Pokemon game since Generation like 6, if they had the shiny charm already. I mean, you just chain fish and X and Y, you Dex Nav and Auras, you do that the call for help thing in Sun and Moon, or like the Ultra World portals, whatever they're called in Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon. You do the I forget what it's called in Sword and Shield, like the chaining or whatever. Like, you can easily get a shiny or more a day in these games, and that's just like gets rid of the fun, I would say. I mean, I remember going for my first shiny. I was probably when did Heart Gold Soul Silver come out? That was like 2009, I think. And so one of those years after that, I remember having gone on YouTube for like the first times way back when I was a kid and seeing like videos of people getting shinies. That was the first time I ever had seen them, and I decided to hunt for a shiny Pidgey, and just holding out hope that I would eventually get it, I went on to like the Route 1 on the Kanto side of the game, and just ran around for like, I mean, I think it took me like 4 or 5 days, like real life days, so probably like, I mean, it was probably 10 hours a day or more. Like, I was totally dedicated when I woke up, and when I, like, from the time I woke up to the time I went to sleep, I was just shiny hunting Pidgeys, and I got it, and it was like the coolest thing ever. And I don't know, since then I've gotten like so many full odds shinies in those old games. I have full odds shiny Mewtwo, shiny Rayquaza, like multiple shiny Wurmples, shiny Zubat, shiny Mankey, shiny I can't remember. I know I have more than that, but yeah. And those are like, didn't even take that long, I guess, like by comparison. But I just think like the multi-day hunts were really fun to do. And obviously it's a tangent, but like I said, it just has to do with the fact that the longer Pokemon has been around, the more like content they try to stuff in, and it just becomes a worse game in my opinion. And like I said, I mean, when shinies were actually really hard to get, having a full team of shinies or anything even close to it, like 2 or 3 shinies on your team, was like, holy cow. And another thing too, this kind of ties into real life as well, like the argument behind genetic mutation, or like, I guess, genetic modification, I should say, and how, like, is it ethical to modify the genes of a fetus, to basically either enhance it or, something to that effect. I think there's a movie called like Gattaca about this exact concept, and essentially like I mean, I'm pretty sure that's how all kind of like racism, things like that start, is like some kind of genetic inferiority or superiority complex. But yeah, essentially like the Pokemon you get nowadays, you can just totally engineer them to be exactly what you want, regardless of, I mean, anything. I mean, you can get the perfect IVs. Hidden power is gone, so the IVs don't even matter anymore. You can get the ability change. It's like, what's personal about the Pokemon anymore? Like, okay, yeah, you have your shiny on your team, but like, it's just, totally perfect because, it required no luck. It's like, when you got shinies before, like in Generation 3, before Emerald, and like you couldn't synchronize at all, if you got a good nature on the shiny, that was like the best thing that ever happened to you. But now that, every single part of your Pokemon can be changed with items, things like that, like, it's like, on paper it's better, but in reality it's like, it's worse. I don't know, like I said, it's a matter of my opinion, but I think a lot of people who shiny hunted in the past, or just appreciate the old Pokemon games for what they are, can see where I'm coming from as far as why I think it's a lot worse to have everything so readily accessible, and any shiny you get is automatically going to be viable because you can change things. I think the only thing you might not be able to do now, I guess, is like egg moves after the fact or hidden abilities, but obviously if you breed, that stuff is guaranteed. So yeah, I mean, what's actually difficult to get anymore? Like, maybe just shiny, like female Combi. I guess that's like somewhat rare, but even by comparison, I don't even think that is. If you're Masuda methoding in these new games with the shiny charm, I feel like your odds are only just a little bit worse than full odds like back then. So I guess it's still pretty hard, but still, like, it might be exactly full odds actually. But yeah, so anyway, I'll digress from Pokemon for now, and I'll talk about a game called Auto Chess, which I know there's multiple games that are auto chess games, but if you've never heard of them, essentially they're like, a brief explanation is like there's a piece pool, and essentially there's like, I think maybe 6 players, I can't remember now, but essentially the round starts and you basically get like a buy period, and you can get pieces from a giant pool, and you can see what other people grabbed. So by knowing what pieces they grab, that kind of like, in the same way as you count cards in blackjack, you count pieces in a game like that. So if a lot of people have taken a certain like type of monsters, let's just say like a wind type monster, then you don't want to go for wind type monsters because your probability is lower because other people have already taken them. So when your shop rotates to buy more pieces, you're going to have a less likely chance of getting the wind monsters. And so based on the knowledge of what the opponents are going for, you can maybe figure out, okay, what's the best strategy with the remaining like unbought pieces? Like, what's my best probability to get a good army going? That's kind of how the game works in gist. There's a couple other things, but for the most part, that's all you would need to know on why these games are self-defeating. So basically, the problem with these games is that, how do you improve them? How do you update them? And the answer is you can't. So you can add pieces, but guess what that does? That, like I just said before, that's like adding cards to a deck in blackjack. Now, you're counting cards, and your probability and your chances are totally skewed because there's a new, piece in the mix. And so when a game is designed for 6 players and there's like a cap on the amount of pieces in there, those odds are consistent, and you can practice that and you can be good. Well, as soon as you start adding more pieces, the game balance that was initially like thought of to begin with is totally abandoned because now you have totally different odds. And of course they can do things to change this to where, the overall odds of certain types aren't affected, or let's say they take a piece out and add a piece in, but that's not how, most of the time it goes. And even then, that's like, like I said, I haven't seen any auto chess game do that, and if there is one, then you can let me know. But most of them that I've seen, or all of them that I've seen, add pieces to the pool and therefore ruin the fundamental concept of the game. I mean, it doesn't even work work anymore because, like I said, I mean, even one piece totally changes the whole dynamic. And so, of course, you can add party modes or whatever, but if you want to have a game that's competitive and long-lasting like that, when you add more pieces, it just ruins the game. And yeah, so another game, or I guess group of games or titles, are the competitive games that use like champions. So games like Overwatch, League of Legends, Valorant, where they can add things like maps. I mean, even League of Legends, like, they won't put on different maps, I don't think, ever. I don't play League of Legends, so I wouldn't know, but what I do know is when they add champions, you basically just add more rock, paper, scissors to the game. So, you know, if they're using a certain team comp, which, of course, this is all subjective, at least in this instance, where, you know, the addition of more champions makes strategy somewhat deeper, but it also just contributes to rock, paper, scissors, because now you can't really get a good guess of what they're going to run, and you may be more or less likely to have a harder time based on matchup that you have no control over. And yeah, so any competitive game where like two characters' abilities kind of cancel out each other, or when you add a new character, it's like how many characters can you add until you're either, you know, reusing ideas from other characters into where the character doesn't even feel new or different anymore. So you have like kind of a limit on how much you can really add in those type of games. Those aren't as big of a deal because, like I said, those are mostly skill-based, not strategy. So like those type of statistical odds can usually be overcome by just raw skill, and that doesn't really affect the gameplay that much, but still a thing to consider. Another game that has the same issue is Clash Royale, which you can tell by just the fact that the card releases have been so slow from that team. Like, either they're extremely lazy, or, you know, the more likely scenario, which is that there really isn't that many good ideas left to add to the game. When the game came out, I believe there was like 36 or like 40 cards, somewhere in that range, and now there's 97 or 8. And so you can imagine like a game where fundamental concepts like, you know, a short-ranged melee unit with low health to, you know, a ghost that's invisible but becomes visible when he attacks and has small, like, to medium range splash melee damage, to an electro wizard that you play and it acts as a zap spell that also retargets enemies, but he can also target 2 enemies at once. Like, things like that, where the concepts, like, how deep can you go before you just fundamentally just kind of go off the rails or make cards that don't make any sense. So, for instance, cards like the Elixir Golem or the Healer or the Elixir Pump, these are cards that, although they have a unique gimmick and like are subjectively good or bad for the game, it still begs the question that like these cards fundamentally change the way the game is played in every match they're in, so much so to where the game doesn't even feel like the same game anymore. Which, like I said, is still subjective, but it's just the fact that how many concepts are there on the table before you just start reusing stuff. So, for instance, I can name probably 10 cards right now off the top of my head that are just recycled ideas, like, mashed together. So, like, the Rascals were just a knight with archers behind it. The, I guess, Dark Goblin is just a, you know, longer range Spear Goblin with more damage. Like, it's just a longer ranged unit with less damage, like, or I guess a little bit more damage. Like, when you have ranged DPS, when they just add more ranged DPS, it's like, I don't know, like, you have the Magic Archer, the Musketeer, the Executioner, the Flying Machine. I guess, like, all of them are slightly different in what they do, but it's still, like, I don't know, those aren't really the best examples, only because they are unique enough to where they feel different to play against. Like, all of them are. So I think in that regard, like, they're not totally useless, but cards like I said, the Rascals or the new Skeleton Dragons, or I guess like the Goblin Gang, it's like they all fill niches, and so they're okay for that, but you can kind of see where it goes. Like, right now, because of the amount of like rehashed sort of like bait cards they've added, there's Bats, there's Goblin Gang, there's Skeleton Barrel, and these cards, which I was like just referencing them, if you've never played the game, essentially just take my word for it that they added so many swarm unit cards to where now it used to be there were not enough to run a strategy where your entire deck is swarm, and therefore when you decide to play a swarm card that was in an effort to bait out a spell from your opponent, well, now it doesn't matter like if you bait them out or not for the most part, because there are so many swarm cards, you can just constantly play them. And unless your opponent is running a specific deck with like 3 spells just to counter you, they'll never have enough to counter all the swarm. So it just feels really like toxic to play against, because even the high level matches basically come down to spamming at the bridge. Like, you defend, then you just spam minor bats, skeleton barrel, whatever, and then defend, and then go back and forth. It's like I said, people can find it fun, and there's no problem with that. It's just the idea that because the game has been around so long, and they've added so many concepts, like, the game could have never predicted itself to get this far, and if it knew it would be like this now, would they have changed stuff in the initial group of 40 cards, or would they have, maybe stopped at some point? It's like, how much does money or like profit or keeping the game alive fly in the face of the game actually playing like it's intended, or something to that effect? Like, do you just stop updating it? Like, that does never seem like the right answer, but like taking away cards isn't the right answer either. So when you're at this position where there are just so many cards, like, can you really keep adding more? I really do want to see, like, in let's say 5 years time, if Clash Royale is still around, like what the concepts are by then, because there's already so many unique concepts in that game. And so Clash Royale's sister game, Clash Clans, sort of has the same problem, in the sense that if you try to start a Clash Clans base right now, it would take you, I want to say, like 7 years if you never spent any money to actually complete a base, which, I mean, your life is worth a lot more than a Clash Clans account, so please don't do that. I can tell you from experience, I played Clash Clans, like a ton in like 2015, 16, when I was in high school, and I have like a pretty good like talent 11, like I would say like it's like a talent 10.5 max, so it has like high level stuff or whatever, but yeah, basically the problem with Clash Clans is not only did they add a pass royale, which is also the bane of every game ever, and I'll maybe make a separate video about that. I could talk about that forever, but basically how Clash Clans keeps adding more and more levels to like the upper echelon of the game, and so more intricate strategies basically become obsolete, just because the most consistent thing now is just to spam troops, and of course high level war and things like that doesn't really apply. I'm saying, more or less the generic base, like multiplayer of the game, you're gonna go against random bases, and so your best chance is to pick the most generic army that can just do the job and require the least amount of precision or like IQ to actually perform. So for the most part, like talent 11, at least back when I used to play, you would just use Electro Dragons, and of course I know there was a period where Electro Dragons were like way overpowered. I'm pretty sure they got nerfed, but essentially you just queue up 11 Electro Dragons and like a clan castle and just drop them all, put rage spells down, and just wipe the base out. And it's like, there's no planning, there's no structure to it. Like, it feels fun because you're taking out like high level bases, but like at the end of the day it just gets old because you're not really doing anything that like manifests itself as a strategic or fun thing to do. I mean, you could literally just hand the phone to someone who's never done it, and they could perform the attack just as well as you without any prior knowledge. Like, that's how you kind of know when the game starts to become unfun, is when there's really no skill to be had in the base like gameplay. And so, like I said, war and more competitive stuff that players go out of their way to do, that's a bit different. But that's, like I said, a whole other topic. And yeah, and even another gripe I guess I have too is how they, just like how Pokemon made shinies easier to get, they also reduce prices on the Clash Clans like upgrades. So this town hall 13 or 14 now, or whatever it is, but yet the walls and the buildings and stuff cost a lot less than they used to. So like, is it even as hard or as cool to get there now, considering how much you worked up to the base? But now having got to town hall 14 or something, you may have spent like several billion extra resources than someone who would start right now. And whether that cost you money or not, like, that's still like, they're probably obviously legally totally safe from that type of like argument, but yeah, essentially how, you know, they've diluted what it means to even be that level anymore. Like a Town Hall 11 in 2015 or whenever I had it first was like a relatively high Town Hall at that time. I think like Town Hall 12 was already out by the point I got to Town Hall 11 because I maxed out Town Hall 10 before I went there, but it was still like, you know, difficult to get there. There wasn't, I mean, I think they had reduced prices on like maybe a couple of the walls, or at one point there was an update where you could spend elixir on walls, like all wall levels, or like maybe from like 7 to 8, and that increased a lot of people's walls quickly, but still the basic idea remains, which is that by making the currency less valuable and making like the higher levels easier to obtain, because of, you know, I mean, they had to make the high levels to keep people playing the game, right? Well, by doing that, you kind of defeat their own purpose. Like, having high level Clash of Clans space was always about how much resources and time you spent playing the game. Well, now, like I said, it's devalued just because of the fact that they keep adding to it and therefore keep reducing the cost of everything else. And yeah, my final, I guess, game to talk about is one of the greatest games of all time, if not, that'll remain to be seen, I guess. Like, let's see in 40 years if it's still as popular as it is, but Minecraft. So, Minecraft, I didn't really ever play Minecraft until, I want to say, like, on the PS4. So, I remember back in, like, middle school or something like that, when people had on the Xbox 360, and I didn't really have internet back then, so I knew people that played it, and I played it at their houses, but never actually played by myself. And yeah, the game was a lot different back then, even in like 2013 or so when I played it on PS4, or 2014, I'm not really sure. Wow, it's crazy to think that was 6 years ago now. But basically, they're adding a lot to Minecraft, and according to a lot of people that have played Minecraft since like a really long time ago, these things sort of take away from what vanilla Minecraft really is supposed to be, in their opinion. And I can sort of agree with this in the sense that I think, for instance, like the Nether update that's supposed to come out, like that will fundamentally change the way every pre 1.16 like version of Minecraft plays and looks. I mean, the entire Nether looks totally different, and so I'm not saying these changes are bad necessarily, but does the game need progression? Like, do they need to update Minecraft? I mean, the general like effect of what the Nether update will bring can be achieved already in game. Like, obviously certain blocks and such, like the color schemes and palettes won't be exactly the same, but for the most part, you know, with texture packs and like mods and like that, you could easily achieve what this is. And so a lot of people want to argue, and I agree to some degree, that the game should be kept like very baseline, and because mods are so accessible, that, you know, the direction to take the game should be in like the user's hand, not so much like, okay, now we'll fundamentally change vanilla every year and make it more and more like stray from what Minecraft was, because they're never going to revert any of these changes. So, you know, Minecraft will always be more complex than it was the previous year, and like I said, whether or not that's a bad thing, that's just totally up to you. But I think there's an argument to be made where, you know, how much can they change before Minecraft doesn't even feel like Minecraft? I mean, there's quality of life things that I don't think anyone should be able to argue with, like, you know, Elytra, for instance. I mean, being able to fly and survival is so useful, and like makes the game, I mean, so much more fun after you beat the Ender Dragon. Like, that's a real goal to achieve now versus before. I mean, you beat the Ender Dragon for what? Just to say you did to get the dragon egg or whatever. But with the Elytra and the end cities, like, there's so much more incentive. And so, like, post-game Minecraft since Elytra, like, that's, I think, inarguable. I think that one's so good. Like, the shulker boxes make the game really fun, just for, you know, obvious reasons. But yeah, I mean, like I said, how much can they add before it kind of reaches its limit? Or like, do they need to add more? What's the point of adding more? I mean, I guess it gets people excited, like, I want to play 1.16 for the netherite armor and things like that, but you know, even the aquatic update, it still doesn't even feel like totally right when you see ships and like dolphins and things like that. I mean, it's in the game for sure, but it feels like the same way to me as, anything past, I guess, my nostalgic childhood, like, memories. It's like, once it starts becoming too new, I judge it, like, from a more, like, realistic lens, and it's like, what good is this stuff in the game? I mean, like, the game doesn't really need these updates. It's totally fine, like, how it is, and the players have always been what made Minecraft so good, so, updates to the game only just further break mods and things like that. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about this concept of games and how they're designed and with the intention to either last long due to profits or just other, I guess, financially. I mean, it doesn't even always have to be motivated by profit, but just games that get updated, and are updates actually a bad thing for a lot of games. And yeah, I mean, the most complaining you usually hear out of communities is fresh after an update, whether it be because of, a change or a nerf to something or a buff to something. It's like, which I get, like, you can always tie this back to the fact that maybe they want to stir things up because then it makes the game more talked about or whatever. That's like, gets into conspiracy land though. But yeah, anyway, so let me know what you guys think about this, and if you have any other games you play that I didn't mention that have this problem, or you can foresee it happening with that game. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. And yeah, please subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.